So much so that I would say that the state government has implemented in these 5 years several welfare programs orienting them towards sustainable self-employment. In fact, every scheme of the state government, if one were to notice the schemes, especially the welfare schemes, one would be surprised to see what kind of a transformational bearing these schemes have. To begin with, everything is DBT, direct benefit transfer, where there's no middleman in between, where everything is transparent and there's no corruption there. Now, having said that, every scheme is hand-holding women. So much so that every scheme is translating. Say, for instance, I speak about Cheyuta as one particular scheme. The scheme actually narrates hand-holding women, same particular woman, consistently for 4 years, every year giving 18,750 rupees for the same woman. So in 4 years' time, you actually hand-hold the same woman, giving every year 18,750 to the same women. While we are doing that, we ensured that there's a bank tie-up also coming into picture. We've also ensured that big companies, starting from Amul to ITC, to Reliance, to Procter & Gamble, to such kind of big companies also partnering with these women in sharing opportunities, in showing them livelihood opportunities. So it's a mix of the same women so that these women stand on their feet. Likewise, if one were to see every scheme that the state government has been undertaking in these 5 years, every scheme is a combination of livelihood opportunities, either provided to strengthen the current existing livelihood opportunities or to create new ones. In fact, if one were to actually look at how the employment cycle goes, most of the employment cycle doesn't come from government employment. Government employment per se, before we had come in, probably we had 4 lakh jobs in government sector. And probably government being very proactive in actually providing for jobs could actually create another 2 lakh jobs, which is actually very high. Before we had come in, we had 4 lakhs for decades. And after we had come in, we actually created 50% more jobs in government sector. But that is where it can end. It cannot go beyond that. You're talking about 4 lakhs being to 6 lakhs. Then per se, the big industrialists also, when we were to speak of, if one were to see the translation of opportunities of jobs actually created per se for investment that is actually put in, would probably translate to probably 1 crore of investment translating into one particular job. Not much. Maybe adding to another 2 or 3 lakhs, not beyond that. The major contribution comes from 3 other sectors. One is agriculture, which actually constitutes 62% of the workforce. Now, what we have done is support agriculture, where, in fact, the best part in agriculture is, the challenging part in agriculture is, even though the fact still remains that 62% of the population depend on agriculture, the fact is, 50% of the land holding is less than 1.25 acres, that is half hectare. If one were to translate this land holding into, for calculation's sake, as to up to 1 hectare, if one were to take into consideration, then you're talking about 70% of the land holding is within 1 hectare. We have very small and marginal farmers, and if these small and marginal do not make money, the economy is shattered. What we did, what we could actually do, is come up with those initiatives to handhold farmers through RBKs, setting up of Raitu Bharosa Kendras where every village has one, where you have an agricultural graduate sitting in those villages, in those RBKs, where everything from seed to sale of crop is handheld through these RBKs. And with such kind of micromanagement, also incentivizing farmers with production incentives as well, that farming sector could survive. This is one major sector which actually comes to give you a support for the employment. Then the other major sector, which is another sector which actually supports, is MSME. MSME is also a one word to speak of, talking about if industries, mega industries, big industries constitute maybe 3 lakh, 4 lakh jobs. You're talking about MSMEs which actually constitute more than 30 lakh jobs. There per se, the employability rate is more. Every MSME is small, but yet employs more number of people when conversion ratio takes place from investment perspective. But these 30 lakhs, these 3 lakhs, these 4 lakhs, these are not the numbers. Dominantly self-employed sections. Self-employed sections constitute a primary more than 1.5 crore population, which actually doing well for the economy to do well. And through various schemes, various platforms, we've ensured that these self-employed sections are handheld, given support through various schemes. You know, I'll give you an example. Before we had come in, we were talking about self-help groups, which actually constitute more than 1 crore of women. Before we had come in, these self-help groups had an NPA and outstanding loans to the extent of 18%. Today, the same self-help groups, the outstanding loans and the NPAs, if one were to look at in this sector now, it is just 0.3%. And 1 crore of women livelihoods are dependent on that. If one were to see the same thing in every scheme like Vahana Mitra, which talks about self-employed sections who actually are driving the cabs or actually driving the autos. If economy there fails, the entire state fails. We're talking about barbers. We're talking about so many sections running into lakhs, and together running into crores, which actually have been supported so as to render phenomenal growth rate. In fact, when we had come in 2018-19, our state was figuring probably the least among the states in growth rate, in GSDP growth rates. The last year numbers, if one were to say, we're figuring in top 5 states in the country. If GSDP growth rate were to be figured in. Similarly, every initiative that we've taken in supporting every sector, the MSMEs for instance, our state can boast about that we had ensured that timely MSME incentives were given even during the times of COVID. That actually protected the MSME sector So much so that today, the kind of growth that we have seen in MSC sectors was so unprecedented in the state of Andhra Pradesh. In fact, the reasons have resulted in the state's manufacturing GVA, when viewed as a percentage of India's manufacturing GVA, increasing to 4% during 2019 to 24 from the corresponding figure of 2.9% during 2014 to 19. That was the previous regime. That is the kind of GVA contribution. State's manufacturing GVA to a percentage of India's manufacturing GVA, if one were to compare. We're actually contributing 4% now, versus